well then.
Right.
Oh, all right. So
How do we switch, before we do that, how do we switch this to the video again? I guess so we all know.
Oh, yeah.
There we go.
Hang on.
start over.
Spotlight it.
Nice, man.
Let's go.
Cool. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna let each person, I'm gonna give them a very short intro, just their title, and then let them have a couple of minutes to kind of talk about who they are, what their credentials are, and then we'll jump into questions. I have a bunch of prepared questions, but if anyone on the Zoom or in this room has a question after the first couple, please raise your hand. This is I did not count how many years of experience they have, but it's decades of hiring and dealing with teams. And one of the things I tried to do here was reach out to people who are, especially around Ruby Rails. And someone on a Slack I'm on, I announced this on, said, well, what's different about hiring for Ruby and Rails versus anything else? And I'm interested to find out myself. So,
Switch positions.
Robyn, would you like to go first and just give a couple minute intro?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Robyn from Turing School of Software and Design. I'm the partnership manager. So I help our new grads as well as our alumni find a job post-graduation or after their first or second job. What else were we supposed to say? I'm so sorry.
You don't have to take the whole time. You don't want to. So you might want to speak more about like the partnership management piece, like, because I don't know what that means really, other than helping
Sure.
people. Like, what does that really mean? Nuts and bolts.
Yeah. So I try to make it as easy as possible to hire from our community. We have a job board that I help people post on. We have a portfolio site that I help companies go through to find newer grads or soon to be grads looking for their first job. I also go to conferences to do a lot of outreach. So I'll be going to RubyConf in Houston in just a couple weeks. If any of you all will be there, love you to come say hi. Jeff will be there as well. Yeah, so it's just like a lot of outreach, talking to companies and getting them to know and understand the rigor of Turing so that they hire from our community.
Okay, great. Thank you. Kyle, would you like to go next? He's
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, Kyle Lamy, VP of Engineering at a company called Maxwell. We provide a SaaS platform for independent lenders, mortgage banks, brokers, people in the mortgage industry, along with other services there. But yeah, I've been doing software development for 15 years, started out in kind of government consulting, moved to Boulder in 2012. I was at Red Hat for a stint in their consulting branch, moved to Boulder to get involved in startups. That's where I met Kevin. Did work with him at Birdbox when they're just through Techstars. Tried my own startup once or twice with some folks. Did some work at Plex TV. If anyone uses Plex for their media center application stuff. So that was pretty fun. And then, yeah, just kind of in the startup scene and been at Maxwell now for over 3 years, leading the engineering team.
Great. Okay, cool. Jerry, would you like to go next?
Yeah, so I'm Jerry Ramey. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Mobilize. We're based out of Arvada, so just down the street a little bit. But we primarily work in the government space. We have a platform called Vision that essentially runs all the innovation projects for the military and the Air Force and the National Guard. We're hopefully, fingers crossed, bringing on Navy and Army soon. And we'll be one of the first platforms to bring the branches together to work together on advancing certain things, which does carry some weight of like we're behind some very intense security concerns sometimes with our platform, but it's fun because like we're one of like the first 15 to start working in the cloud with them. So really exciting. Outside of that, my own career, I've been in Rails, well, Ruby way longer, but Rails for at least the last 9 years of my career. And even just during COVID, like our company had another product called Mobilize Comms, and we did all the texting and surveys for food banks to help get food out during the crisis. So we've went through wild changes in the last 4 years of software. So it's been exciting, and I'm excited like to give everyone some feedback on like what it's like out there.
Cool. Thank you, Jerry. All right, Marty, you wanna
Yep.
take it?
Hi, Marty Haught. Many of you know who I am. I'm a director of engineering at Hashicorp. Got what 27 engineers in my org. Been at ran a consultancy myself for 13 years. Haught Codeworks. Been running this meetup since 2006. Been doing Ruby since 2005. 25 years in the industry. Most recently, I've done a lot of hiring at Fastly and at Hashicorp. I did hiring at the consultancy, but it's a little bit different than certainly how I hire it at Fastly, how I hired at Fastly and hire at Hashicorp. So that's me.
Cool. All right, so the first question is, what's your assessment of the job market for Ruby and Rails engineers? And Robyn, I was on a panel where I was a Zoomer as well, so you're a little bit disadvantaged. So I'm gonna let you go first if you want to, or you can pass, whatever you want to do.
Sure, I can just say from my perspective, Dish Network is hiring a ton of Ruby developers. I know they're not like everyone's first choice in, I mean, any of those like Comcast, Dish are like not ideal, but they are hiring a ton of folks over the next year. And they are working with us closely. They just hired a couple of juniors. They are in person, which I know a lot of people are not interested in at all. And I went to Rails Conf earlier this year, and like I said, I'll be at Ruby, and they do have job fairs and lots of people looking for jobs and also a lot of people sharing jobs. Of course, mostly people want mid or senior, which I find extremely frustrating because the longer you wait for a senior, you could probably train up a junior in, a similar amount of time. The job market was pretty low in the summer compared to the previous summers, but it is on an upswing where we track our hires pretty closely, and on average, it is like on the upswing noticeably.
Cool. Does anyone who's physically present want to chime in on that question? General job market.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of had a little bit of debate internally when we were hiring more, but I think from what I've seen is you have a little bit of a shift from Ruby into Node.js and kind of those other platforms. I still think there's a good base though, in the startup world, just because it's such a productive language and it's enjoyable to work in. So I think they'll always be there, but I think for sure since at least 2012, which is kind of when I first jumped into the Ruby land, it's definitely not as prevalent. I think you see some other things like Elixir and Phoenix and some other frameworks there that have kind of come in there. But yeah, I would say if you're looking, I would say, in the startup realm, I know Boulder in Colorado has a really strong presence, and so I think startups are going to be your best bet for finding a job in Ruby and Rails.
Yeah, I would even say just being in the room and hearing there was at least 4 or 5 of us looking to hire still shows that the market's still available for it out there. And even companies are established with Rails, or maybe it's a subset of something else they're doing. It's like they're probably always looking still. Like for us, we always are looking for developers, even if we're not looking for developers. So I think that's kind of the pulse of the entire industry right now.
I would definitely chime in to say that there hasn't been as many announcements for a year for hiring, looking for jobs or hiring as well, which is an interesting uptick. And as far as this,
You mean this month?
like here right
was
now,
more
yeah.
than we had previous months. Gotcha.
Yeah, I think that about a year ago or 9 months ago is incredibly hot, very hot. There was a lot of spiral of sort of comp happening. I think once spring hit, a number of companies started to pull back. Some of those companies overextended themselves and now find themselves doing reductions in force or layoffs because they're at large scale and they can't afford it. But I still see people posting jobs and there's still openings out there. Hashicorp didn't have to do that, but we did cool off our hiring sort of cadence, but we still continue to hire, just not as hot of a pace as we had. So I think there are definitely jobs out there, but you might have to look a little harder, and there might be a lot more people applying, especially with the layoffs, but I don't have any data to prove that.
Cool. So this is one of my favorite questions. Everyone likes to think about good reasons to switch jobs. What are bad reasons to switch jobs?
I would say in the market we're in right now, the risk of switching jobs is you don't necessarily know the stability of the company, and you also haven't built trust in those teams in order to withstand a potential riff, right, or layoff. And so I would think about that, right? If you enjoy your work, if you're on a pretty decent team, like that's, there's something to think about there versus you're jumping into a little bit of the unknown. And every company is gonna pitch like we're stable, we're all of these things, right? So you have to take that with a grain of salt, right? You don't know what's gonna happen, right? You could have said the same thing about Facebook or all the other ones, to where they're like rescinding offers, right? So I would say there's risk in the market right now of not knowing that. And so, unless you're like miserable and it's a toxic culture, I would maybe think about, if you've built up a lot of trust on your team and in your company, and your current company is going to potentially be facing a riff, right? Like you have a lot more buy-in than somebody who's brand new.
Robyn, you have any comment?
Bad reason to change jobs. Yeah, I'd say I agree with what everyone's saying. I also wouldn't change jobs for a small amount of money. If you're going to change jobs, I would go for some big bucks if it's stability seems questionable. But yeah, I mean, like you all were saying, if your job is good, you can like casually look and change jobs for the right one. But if you're in dire need because it's a toxic work environment, I think that's a good time to change a job.
Yeah, I think the grass is not always greener. I actually have 2 stories of people that passed up job offers from me that later came back 9 months saying the place they chose was not what they thought. So I think you have to be very careful because, comp and other things might be very attractive, but there's a lot of other intangibles that are super important to your job happiness that you don't know. So it's one thing to leave because you're not being challenged or you're not giving opportunities or it's toxic or whatever, but you're going to unknowns and you just it might be worse.
Those are interesting questions to think about too, because I think those people that you are referencing now have many more questions they would ask in an interview of the company.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Those are really important questions to work through and think about.
Yeah, and I would say like for us, it's like it's kind of going back to like what you said about the trust. It goes both ways, and like if you've already built trust within a company, I would say that that's a moment to really consider, like, do you really want to switch that job or not? Because as an owner and a CTO, I always think about certain people come to my mind first, and it's always that deepest trust I have with them. So if you have that is probably more valuable than, especially in negotiations. Like if you want a higher salary, like that is a great negotiation tactic. So to keep that in mind is like, how much trust do you have?
Chris says the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Absolutely. All right. Any questions from anybody else? Because I got lots more. Oh, Michael's saying something.
He's just saying NREL is stable and national.
He's pitching what we just said.
Okay. If no one has any questions, I'll go on to the next one, which is what kind of areas of growth are you as a hiring manager keeping your eye on? Like what technologies or domains or other things are you like, wow, that is going to be a big thing, if anything? Okay, next question.
Crypto. No.
Too soon.
I don't know if I could answer that a little bit differently, maybe. I mean, I guess if,
Yeah, answer how you.
yeah, I mean, I guess I would think about like areas of growth. I don't know if this may be different, but what kind of came to mind when you started asking that is like what I would look for in somebody, but like, you know, looking for past ownership of projects of like, you know, what they've delivered. And it sort of depends, right, on the level you're hiring for, whether that's senior or more, you know, entry level. And so for senior engineer, right, like, are they going to be able to run with a project, right? Are they going to be able to own it, you know, from beginning to end and really provide that technical leadership? That would be something.
What does that mean? It's easy. I mean, I could tell you that right now. I can own a project.
Yeah.
Like, what does it actually look like? Like,
Yeah, I think, you know, you have to dive in and like those interview questions to really kind of pull those things out. But, you know, I think there's, as far as like technical leadership that I would look for is obviously they have to have the ability to write well-structured code and, you know, all of those things. I think it's more, a little bit more that soft skill aspect, right? What's, you know, if they're going to be thinking about a project, you know, at the very beginning, are they able to write and communicate, whether it's written or spoken word, you know, their plans and design docs and things like that. So I think there's more to what I look for in a senior engineer as for a tech lead outside of just coding. It's some of those other skills, the planning process, communication is really important. The mentorship piece, you know, I would look for, are they willing to pair, right? Are they willing to sit down and talk through, you know, questions with entry-level folks? So I think all of those things combined is kind of maybe what I'd be looking for.
I think one thing I would say, kind of riffing on what Kyle's mentioning, and this is for any of you doing interviewing, there's a thing called SBI, which is situation, behavior, and impact. And you know, hiring managers are going to see, you know, what the situation you were in, what did you do, and what was the impact you had, what was the outcomes you were seeking, and how are you actively involved in achieving that? And so, like, you know, that sort of, I guess, soft skill space of like, I understood what the business needed. I understood what mattered here. I made good choices. Here's kind of the things here's my process that I went through to make those choices. Here I helped my team achieve this thing and deliver results. And if you can articulate that, that's really powerful. And you can do that as a junior, as a mid. You don't have to wait till you have a senior title. Like, you can totally have that impact, you know, with anything, even just building a simple feature, or improving, you know, how you build your tests or whatever. Like, you can totally do the same thing.
Yeah, it's like, what ownership and initiative did you show, right? It's like, I wasn't told necessarily from the product manager that like, we need to do these things, but I saw that there was a need, and I, on my own volition, right, talked to these teams or this person and was able to, you know, implement this based on those conversations. I think that's really key.
Could Robyn / Katie chime in on the STAR method? I don't know what that is. Or if I do, I don't know by the acronym.
Katie, it's situation, task. Yeah, you unmute. You got this.
Yeah, situation, task, action, and result. And that's just like kind of the basic framework for like how you should present a story.
Thank you.
Great.
I did not know that.
That's what Amazon sends in their interview package, if I recall. Right?
Yeah, I interviewed at Amazon.
Yeah.
That's literally like, it's 6 hours of those questions. And it's like, by the 6th hour, you're like, I'm repeating a lot of stuff.
To the same people.
No, to different people, but it's like, they're all taking notes, and you're trying to avoid the same story, but like, you really have to prepare, because it's like, man, I've done a lot, but I have a hard time remembering, you know, 2 months ago.
Yeah.
So I think that's another tip, right? In your current job, like, keep a brag sheet or, you know, a log of kind of what you've been working on, the projects. It's not only going to help internally for promotion processes and talking to your managers, but, you know, when you go to that next interview, it's going to help there.
Does everyone know what a brag sheet is? Does anyone,
We should probably explain what a brag sheet is.
would one of the panelists like to explain what a brag sheet is?
I mentioned it. Yeah, I mean, it's really just taking notes on like the things you've accomplished. You know, it's, you know, putting those details in writing so that you have kind of a journal of those things, and you can kind of, you can use it in performance conversations. You can use it, like I said, in the next interviews. Because otherwise you'll kind of do what I was doing, where it's like, all right, let me think back on working with Kevin, like, you know, and really trying to think of all these very specific instances that apply in a lot of different situations and questions you might be asked, but it's a lot more work to do it after the fact, I guess I would say.
And you'll forget,
Yeah.
like, you'll forget the little things that can have, quite a large impact that maybe you weren't aware. And so it's really good to keep it. It's also good, of course, to go over it with your manager, because they might point out things like, oh, you did this one thing, it was super impactful. Like, I didn't realize that. Put it in the brag sheet.
You can also use it when you're asking for a raise. So you can be like, look at all this fun stuff I've done over the last 6 months, year, whatever. Look how I've contributed. Give me more money. Something like that, but better. Don't say it like that.
My manager and I literally have a document called the brag doc, and every one on one we go over it. So I have a reminder every Friday to go try to throw something on there if I don't remember to do it, at the time. And I take that from when I was when I was at Walmart like 10 years ago. The VP there told me, he's like, every month I write down what I did and throw it in this folder, so I keep track of, before the internet. I'm just kidding, but no. So, yeah, you gotta be again. You gotta a lot of those things. If you don't toot your own horn or whatever, they won't toot it for you. So write this stuff down.
Yeah, be your own advocate.
That's actually a good question. Like, how should you be your own advocate? Like, what are good, we have brag documents. That's one way to do it. Like, what are other ways you can be an advocate for yourself? Because every manager I've ever met is super busy. So like, what's a good way for someone who's just an IC or an individual contributor to like help their manager help them?
We do something called define the relationship at Turing, which I think actually could help you self-advocate, is like asking your manager, how often do you want me to come to you with questions? Do you want me to time box? Do you like me to time box at a half hour? Do you like me to time box at an hour? Who do I go to if you're busy? Things like that. And that helps self-advocate for yourself.
Setting boundaries then, or asking them what boundaries you want that they want set, basically.
Yeah, and I think you'd want to, Laura Hogan talks about a Voltron. And it's more kind of like in leadership management circles, but I think you can do the same thing as an IC where, don't just rely on your manager to drive career sort of growth conversations, because they may be great, they might suck at it. And you shouldn't let that limit yourself anyway. And it's good to have peers, other seniors, the folks at your level, that you can talk to, and they can give you a different perspective and help you kind of fill in that gap.
So Marty, you're actually saying get together with people, or like start a Slack channel, or start like a weekly 15-minute Zoom or something like that, and just be like what do the nuts and bolts look like for this?
Yeah, so I would do it. I would probably start with a one-on-one session with them. It's you probably would approach them, asking if they could give you some advice on, a career or sort of like leveling up their skills, especially if they're really good at something. Then you want to pick their brain on that and see if they're willing and interested and have the time. But then it's probably like a one-on-one session where you can have that. You could do a channel if you get a group together wants to do it collectively, but I think in my mind, this is more of a one-to-one personal relationship where they can give you that kind of mentoring advice, and kind of maybe even sponsor you, even if they have that ability.
Can you define sponsor?
Sponsors like finding opportunities for an individual to do something like a project or some work, and helping champion that through talking to others in the organization. Usually your manager is the best person to be a sponsor, but it can be others that are more senior too.
And that's gonna like push you to do talks and meetups too or whatnot. Just to
Yeah.
elevate your-
Talks and meetups are great too. Yeah, there's a whole, we can get into networking, which at some point we should definitely talk about networking here tonight. In relation to job hunting and all that, but we can wait till that's appropriate in the agenda.
Sure.
And something I like to like analyze, like when I'm deciding on raises and hiring and things like that, it's always nice to see the wins, but it's like, I want to see the growth. Like what was the problems you faced during X amount of time? How did you address it? And how did you go about solving it? Or even if you didn't, but just like showing that you put effort towards things that were a challenge. Because to me, that tells me a story of like, this is someone that has a drive. And that's really important for us to see because, sometimes it can get tough. You're faced with a problem as a team, and like the more drivers you have on that team, the more likely you're going to push through that. So that's something that I'm always excited to see come across.
Yeah, I think to answer your question, Dan, to be an advocate on your own career, I think one of the things I would suggest and I see is, your manager does have, it's not just you, right? They're managing other people. And so while they should be looking for your career growth, like that's not their only focus. And so I think part of that practicality is as an IC coming to them and saying, hey, I'm weak in this area, right? Or, I really want to grow in this area. And so how can I accomplish that? Let's work together to set some goals for the quarter, for the half of the year, whatever, that you can work towards, right? And so if you have a good manager, hopefully they're looking for those opportunities proactively, but that's not always going to be the case, right? If somebody comes and says, I want to take on more technical leadership, right? I think anyone at any level can do that. I have stories of, an employee who's done that in spades, and he started out, he didn't actually go to code school. He just kind of self-taught, and we hired him in a QA role, and he's just like blown out of the water, the just taking ownership and, initiative and everything that he does. And so, just being able to set those goals and work with your manager to say, I want to grow in this area. Let's figure out how we can do that. And then, looking for those opportunities.
Yeah, I think initiative is one of those very, it's a rare thing, or at least in my experience. Initiative plus competence will take you a long way. I think I choose that over world-class smarts.
Yeah.
When I was hiring for 90% of the jobs. Anyway, this isn't about me. So one question I have is, and then I'd like to go on the networking thing. Actually, any questions from the audience right now or online? Okay. So one question I had is, what would you say if someone who was on your team and came to you and said, or Robyn, like a Turing student, how do I determine what I want in my career? Like, what kind of things should people be thinking about to even set those goalposts or set those goals?
Sorry, I'm going to ask a clarifying question. So you're asking if somebody came to me and was like, I know I want to be a Ruby developer. I'm in school to be a Ruby developer. What are my 6 months goals? What are my year goals? Things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that sometimes if you just say you're a Ruby developer, that's yeah, I mean, I feel like I don't know if that's a big enough goal, especially when we talk about wanting to be hired, because every manager I've ever talked to that want to interview me, if I just said I want to be a Ruby developer, they're going to be like, and so, so what would you say to help someone, what kind of things should someone think about to refine that goal from something that's super wide to something that might be more of a story they could tell or more guidance for them, right? Does that help?
I guess the first thing I would say is why? Why do you want to do this? What's your drive? Because I've seen plenty of people get in the industry with the promise of what it's going to bring. I'm like, you do know this is going to get hard. and actually you're gonna be in a regular state of, I have shit I don't know how to do, and I'm not sure how I'm gonna solve this, and this is how I'm gonna spend today. Like, do you like that? Do you like not knowing what the solution is gonna be, and then eventually finding it out and be like, yeah, I did it, right? I'm trying to debug this thing, it makes zero sense. So I want to start with why. Why are you here? What drives you? What makes you excited? I think from there, once I know that, then I could like, okay, cool. So here's something I might suggest you go for next, if they didn't already have that.
Great answer.
I think for us, it's like, we just had a few developers that came and expressed interest in actually different areas. Like we have a front end developer who's interested in actually doing more like hands-on UX UI design. So like part of it was like, that's great. Like, of course, there's a calling for that in our industry still, but it's like, at the end of the day, like what is bringing you to it? Like that why to it, but also like, is it something new and shiny, right? Is it, because I think a lot of us get distracted when something new comes out and we all want to touch it and figure it out and be part of it. But and so figuring out that why, also knowing if it's a new shiny thing that's just entertaining for a bit. And so what we've done is like, we've given essentially like teasers, like so she's now working on a small UI UX project on the side of her normal work, so that we can start to determine if this is something that fits for her, or if it is that new and shiny thing. It's like, you got your fill and now you've decided that it's not your career anymore. Because I think that's more important to decide what you're not going to be a good fit for, because you'll continuously to grow in your career and change paths through the whole thing. So I think that's how we handle it, and it's so far it's working. So
Yeah, it's a good, I mean, I think that also applies in engineering tracks, right? Engineering manager and leadership track versus kind of the IC staff to principal engineer. But, you know, I think, yeah, a lot of times it's like, yeah, you have to really work with that person. You know, what makes you interested in an engineering manager position? You're gonna have more meetings, you know, so it's really, I think it's assessing each person's strength and what are their motivations, right? And so, yeah, I would say that in any switch or position, really, it's what are you looking for and what are you after?
Robyn, you would get something? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would suggest someone talks to people in positions they want to be in. Like, there was a time I really wanted to manage people, and I talked to a bunch of friends who managed people, and I was like, never, no, I don't want I like project management, I like program management, people management, I'm hard pass on. But so if you like wanted to get into DevOps, maybe it's the new shiny thing, or it's like something interesting to you, just talk to some folks who do DevOps, see how it relates to your current position, see what the path from like point A to point B is, and then set those goalposts yourself if it does still sound appealing to you. Because I think a lot of people think like, oh, I want to be an engineering manager, or I want to be a CTO. And then they realize like it is a ton of meetings, and it's like not a lot of code or any code sometimes. And that might not actually be what you want. You just think it's what you want.
So Robyn, to make that like super concrete, do you mean like talking to like asking your network and say, like, let's say I want to be a DevOps person. Would you say, Dan, schedule 3 coffee meetings? Would you say, Dan, go shadow somebody? Would you say, Dan, read a DevOps book? Like, what are concrete things you'd advise someone to do?
Yeah, I think, yeah, a combination of that. I would start off with coffee meetings, and then if you're still interested, I'd ask to shadow somebody, and then like start figuring out what books make sense, and then what do DevOps, like people who are hired in DevOps have that you do not, and like what can you do to get to there? So start off with talking to people just to see if it truly is something you want to do.
What kind of questions should you ask them other than like, what's typical day?
Like, is a neck beard really required?
For like, when I was interested in management, I asked like several friends, just like, what is it like? What is your day to day? What do you like about it? What like really motivates you? What doesn't motivate you? What has been rough? Like, what is it like to fire someone? Because lots of managers have to deal with that. What is it like to like put somebody on a PIP? Is that terrible? Is it okay? Like what I know is like rough parts of being a manager that like already scare me. Yeah, and like just talk to a lot of especially for me, especially female managers, because there's also like a layer intersectionality with that, and how it feels to like work with folks that like maybe men who don't respect you, but you still have to manage. I've heard a lot of interesting stories around that. So I don't know if I'm scared off forever, but it was definitely like, I am very much enjoying where I'm at right now, and like know where my strengths are, and managing people doesn't sound fun personally.
Great, thank you.
PIP is a performance improvement plan, which I think most people know, but
It'd be worth saying.
yeah.
And the reason why it's not fun to put someone on it is you have to manage their daily stuff, basically. That's why.
Well, no, like dig in and like talk about what is does everyone know what a PIP is? Because I wouldn't have known what a PIP was 10 years ago. Everyone does? Great.
You can totally.
People don't.
Yeah.
Can someone explain what a PIP is, please?
Do we need to do a PIP? Yeah, PIP. So PIP is usually a very formal mechanism that companies will use to indicate that there's a performance issue, and that basically your job's on the line if you don't improve your performance. And it's formal. If you're terminated, then they've got paperwork on how you didn't respond to the PIP and basically didn't meet the sort of demands of the job. So it's a formal mechanism the companies use. Isn't always an termination, of course, but it's serious if it happens. Means look for a job, new job. Well, possibly if you don't want that job. I think if places that really they don't have good managers might resort to a PIP because they don't know how to manage you. If you get to a PIP, I'm kind of like, why? How did you get to a PIP, and how could you not just handle this through normal management?
So I'm from the nonprofit world, and PIPs are like a big thing in the nonprofit world.
Okay.
It's like also nonprofits never fire anyone because there's like all this layers to it. Like they're worried about getting sued and they're broke already. So the PIP helps there. But I would say one of the things as a manager you have to deal with if somebody's on a PIP is you have to be like, hey, did you do X, Y, and Z this month? Let's see it. Like you have to kind of babysit a lot, which like is not my vibe. I don't want to like sit and micromanage any human ever.
The PIP shouldn't be the first you're hearing about it.
You should not.
Right?
You all suck if the PIP is when you hear like there's an issue. I mean, I don't know about nonprofit world, so maybe Robyn in the nonprofit world, like, yo, PIPs, yeah, all the time.
No, not the first resort. It should like be the last resort.
Great. Okay.
But I think they do surprise people who go find out that they're being put on a.
Yes, I think
They're like,
that's
"I'm doing
true.
great. They're like, you're not doing great.
You're on a PIP
That's a
now.
very challenging ego thing to run into
Yeah.
for a lot of people, and that
Yeah.
can be where they leave, and that's it. You know, like
Yeah.
you could have learned and stayed, but you're just like check out.
Yeah, sure.
Because it feels horrible, I'm sure.
Sure.
A lot of places don't have great managers either. So like, I mean, PIPs are weaponized in a lot of ways, but it's a whole nother subject. But like, I mean, great managers know that that's the last thing to be used. But I haven't found many great managers. Great managers are hard to find, or actually harder to find than I think great engineers.
People are very complicated and layered. It's very hard to manage.
People are messy.
Yeah.
People are messy.
Well, we want to move on to a more positive topic. Let's talk about networking and how you can network to find a job or learn about other jobs. Does anyone have?
Come to Ruby Boulder.
Right.
Yeah, fun story. I started Boulder Ruby so I could network with people.
That's not a fun story.
Self-serving.
And a self-serving story. Very selfish of me to do this. Yeah. So when I moved from Kansas City to Colorado in 2005, I knew that if I didn't have a good network, I would be at the mercy of essentially recruiters that would place you in consulting jobs, which is kind of what I'd fallen back on. And I knew I could do that, but I was like, I'd rather know people and kind of know the different places and let that sort of like guide me to where I might want to work. And I worked very hard to network a lot. And of course, it gave me lots of opportunities. I would certainly not be where I am now if I hadn't been as aggressive networking. And it doesn't have, networking doesn't have to be like insanely outgoing. You're just talking to everybody. It doesn't have to be quite like that, but like, don't underestimate the power of networking and how that'll help you through anything. Certainly, I think there's a question you were going to ask about like, how would you find a new job? And this, actually, I had this after leaving Fastly, is I tapped my network. I did not look for anything. I just said, hey, very quietly around people I knew, that I'm open for something new. And that's how my top 4 or 5 jobs that I considered came to me. So that's a great place to be. You only get there if you build a network.
And it's difficult to do that when you're laid off or whatnot. It's
Yeah,
like,
you don't want, this is not a like, I'll build a network in a week. Like, this took years to build a good network. Yeah.
and we've had people who show up and are like, looking for a job, cool, I see you later. You're like, okay, bro. Like, did you not want to talk about like, really, and be like, friendly? And it was like, that was the only thing they were there for. It really stuck with me that was not, they weren't interested in being part of the community. They wanted a job, and that was it.
Which, I mean,
Okay, I get it, but like, I'm not gonna go out of my way to help you now.
right.
Well, and I should clarify that networking is not about, I want to find a job. It's about connecting to other people that are doing interesting things, and you get to know them, they get to know you. And all of a sudden they're like, ooh, yeah, Marty or Kyle or whoever, like, I know who they are. I know what they like. Oh, maybe you should talk to them. And over the years, I had so many people come to me saying, you know, do you know someone like this that might be able to be interested in this job? And that's the kind of thing that happens when you build that network.
And I would say even further, it's about helping other people.
It definitely helping other people.
Which is
yeah.
why it's not like a weak thing, right? Because like,
Right.
if you need a job to get food on the table, like, I understand you can't have the mental energy to help other people. So this is something you can do while you have a job, and always be on the lookout for helping other people. And, you know, that could be something like hooking people up with like another job, like what Marty was talking about, or an opportunity. It could be something as simple as like, I know Tim is all about veganism, and I might send him an
Not
article.
I like cats.
I might send him an article about that, right? Or just something that like indicates that I care about him as a person. And you could do that over the years, and they've done studies that find that most of the jobs you find are not through like your close friend network. It's like through loose connections. Anyway, actually, I again, not about me. So I had a question for the other panelists. I think Marty had a good example, but what are examples of networking that you've experienced that you can talk to, either something you saw somebody do or something that you've experienced personally?
I guess I'd say step out of your comfort zone. Like when I first moved here to Boulder, I didn't have a job. I knew I wanted to be in the startup world after kind of consulting and Red Hat. And so I came out, I helped found a company through, I don't even know where I connected, but it's a crowdfunding platform. That sort of fell through. And then I think one of the first things I did was I walked in the Techstars office, and I was just like, I met Nicole and had like a 30-minute meeting, and it's like, hey, I'm new to town. I just want to know kind of what's going on.
You just emailed her and
I don't even know if I emailed her. I don't know if I walk in and I was just
into
like,
the office
hey,
and, hi.
can I talk to somebody? And I talked to her, and that's where I met Kevin. They had just graduated from Techstars, and talked to him and Kelly at Pivot Desk with Dave Mandel, and said, yeah, I'll work with Kevin, and contracted with him, and met other people, Ryan Cook from there. So yeah, I mean, I guess for me, that was kind of that out of the comfort zone. Like, I'm kind of new, and I don't know. This worked out.
the specific activity that was out of your comfort zone was like walking into Techstars.
Yeah, like I don't know who I am. I was like, I've heard Techstars does startup stuff. Like, I don't know, it was back in 2012.
I'm just like, can you still do that?
Probably not.
Doors locked.
They were smaller back then. Kevin has a crazy network especially in Boulder. So.
Can I, as mom?
Yeah.
Sorry, okay, so, I'm gonna graduate, I went to CU for computer science, I graduated in long time ago, late 90s. Yeah, late 90s. I'm a grad student. I don't know squat about startups. I'm like, startups seem cool. Like Silicon Valley was kind of happening. I'm like, I'll probably go work at IBM or something, whatever, get a job. I just want to get paid because I'm broke. And I'm flipping through the daily camera, and there's these two young guys who are starting a company in Boulder. It's like, ah, that looks cool. Literally went to their office, knocked on the door, said, hey, what do you guys need any help? I'm a computer science guy. I can help with some things. Got to meet David Cohen. You guys know who David Cohen is? David Cohen. Yeah, so he had a small startup back then. It was a company called Pinpoint Technologies. I got a job as an intern. I worked my way up through that company to run research and development. Met David Cohen, met Brad Feld. So David Cohen led me to Brad Feld, became an entrepreneur in residence at Mobilize, which was pre-Foundry Group. That allowed me to start all these companies and build a good network. It all started from just taking that. And I'm an introvert, like by nature. Like I was probably shaking. I can just imagine myself then, like, what am I doing? Oh my God, am I gonna do this? Knock on the door. Can I talk to David Cohen? And sometimes you just got to do it. You just got to put yourself in these situations, even if you. I think maybe being nervous is probably a good thing. Like that other person's going to recognize it, and they're gonna. David Cohen's an introvert too. I don't know if you guys know the guy, but he is a massive introvert as well. So we're like just looking at each other for a few minutes.
No eye contact.
Oh no, they're very weird, but it turned out to be just a great connection. So just a little story there. I hope that can inspire somebody to do something similar.
Cool. Thank you, Jerry.
Yeah, well, my first job was off of Craigslist for development. Wow. So I didn't really have much networking to go into that, but that's and then like a few years into that job, I realized I wanted to own my own business. So I quickly shifted on that. But something that I've seen work with my interns and juniors and stuff like that is like, is looking for programs that are a little more non-traditional of like that, the hiring funnel. For example, like we have a program called Skill Bridge where we actually take veterans out of the Air Force and other places, and they can come work for us for 6 months while they're ending their contract, and then they can move into a position. We also do that with a few schools to like do some credit exchange, like we're training you, but you get some credits. But at the end of the day, we don't hire everyone. But the point is like they're working a new network. Like we're making introductions because they're helping us do something. Or so I think looking for new pathways to do it is something to be aware of, because in those situations, like I always go back to that trust. Is like I build that trust with those people, and then I'm willing to put my name on the line and be like, hey, I can't hire you, but I'm calling my friends over at Daventry and getting you a job because I know they need this. So, and I did do that a few times for people. So I think it's non-traditional pathways are also something to look into.
So just to put some meat on that, like, what do you mean? Like, I'm an intern. I've just graduated from Turing, or I'm not an intern. I've just graduated from Turing.
Mm-hmm.
How do I find a non-traditional thing other than joining the Air Force and then? Do you Google for it? Like, I mean, like, what? Or do you ask like someone like Robyn? Like,
we have like earlier on, but. Like even in that situation, like we had hired one person who came out of Turing, and they turned out to be pretty great for us. And we were like, at that point, we're growing a little bit, and we told him, it was like, do you have some friends? And then next thing I know, I have 4 of his friends hired, so, and in that way, it's like they built trust with each other in their own program. So then that paid off for them. And now even with one of those individuals, he's been with us for maybe pushing 2 years now, and we're training him as a lead developer because the growth is just so fast for him, and he's showing skill sets we've never seen before. So it's like that wouldn't have happened without just him having a strong connection with the people around him. So
Make sure that's Robyn too.
Thank you for that plug.
yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say networking is really a long game. Like it's not something you're like, okay, I'm gonna network today and I'll have a job in a couple weeks. That's just like not how it goes. Like, I would just suggest showing up to things like this, to Denver Startup Week, Boulder Startup Week. You'll start seeing the same people around, and then being brave enough to go up and talk to those people you've seen before. Like, hey, did I see you at this other event? And then just start chatting, asking people about themselves. Like, everyone loves to talk about themselves, right? So asking people actual questions and, like, listening, so that next time you see them, you have something to talk to them about, which is always a really good thing. And then just talking to people that are like low hanging fruit. So like, if you are a Turing grad, reaching out to alumni at companies, but not asking for a job right away. We do have that issue with our students who are like, hey, you work at Guild Education, can you refer me to a job? And they're like, who are you? So like, really, you have to start the conversation. You can't just like straight up ask for a job. Like, networking is that long game. So like, having conversations now, asking them to review a project or a resume. And then I always think of Ingrid Ilongi, which I think many, if not all of you, probably know. Like, she was on the board, then she was my boss for a little bit at Turing, and her and I still meet for coffee once a quarter. And I think what she does is so interesting and intriguing with venture capitalists funding for like semi-failing companies. And I've told her, if I ever leave Turing, like, I want to work for you, because I think what you do is so incredibly interesting. And, obviously just talking to her and making sure we stay connected over years.
That's awesome. I mean, that actually plays in the next question I had, which is, I hope we've driven home that networking is not like something that's a week kind of time period. Like, what kind of time period is it really? Like, if I am a new grad and I start putting my effort in networking, and I show up at a meetup a week and I, make conversation, like, what's the payoff in terms of, am I looking at a year? Am I looking at like 3 months? Am I looking at multiple? Obviously, it will pay off over my career, right? Like, I'm not saying that, but like, just to put a point on it, like, how long do I have to like network before I can expect any kind of like help?
I mean, there's probably two things I would say. One, it depends on the quality of the connection you make. So if you just show up and you just have small chit chat and you don't really get to know anyone, then you're not really going to go very far. I mean, it's going to take longer. You could potentially make a connection right away that might turn around and get you something immediately. That could happen, but it might not. It might take months or whatever. Also, I think there's probably a piece here where once you've established some sort of connection, you need to kind of let people know what you're interested in, because that will get things going for them. Like, oh yeah, you're looking for what? Okay, cool. I don't have anything right now, but you never know. And they'll be like, oh wait, hey, I just talked to so-and-so and this would be perfect for you. So that would be able to happen at that point.
Yeah, it's all about relationships, really. I think I met Kevin, started contracting at Bird Box. I don't know how long that was for, 8, 9 months, something like that. And then I went to do my own startup. And then it was 2 years later or something, where we started to Dignify. And I don't know if you reached out, who knows, kind of stayed in touch and then worked together for 3 years there.
Yeah.
We get breakfast once a month. So, like, I would say it's a good friend and mentor now, right? And so I think that's kind of what you're looking for, right? Especially when you have, like, we built trust, right? I delivered good code, hopefully. And so that trust that you build with certain people, I think, you want to leverage that, and that relationship hopefully grows into more than just a working relationship.
I think if you're networking for a job, it's probably not going to work, right? Like, you have to network because you want to give something back. I think I met you. I used to host bar camp years ago.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where I met you. And I just want to have a place where geeks could come together to talk about geeky things, because it didn't exist, right? And that was kind of the genesis for that, and that led to other things. Sounds like Marty was a similar motivation. I don't think you just do this for getting a job, right? You do it because you genuinely want to surround yourself with other interesting people that have interesting things to talk about and learn from them. And then at some point, maybe the roles can flip and you can be the mentor instead of the mentee. I think, I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All I've wanted that's helped me with networking is just knowing that some people are super connectors. Like some people have a huge network. So if you spot those people in a crowd and then you connect with them, next time you're with them, they're the type of person that naturally wants to introduce you to like 10 other people. So you can really multiply those connections.
I think that just going with what you said, the authenticity that you're bringing to that conversation, like you're not just trying to dig in to get a job right away, because people can sniff that out. Like it comes off pretty clear. So like being there and being truly interested in the other person and what they're up to can just quickly establish that trust to get you into other conversations. And I think that can shorten your time frame down for you, but it does take that moment of like, I'm authentically interested in you, not just you've got a job.
I almost push up further and be like, you need to have like some kind of goal from a network conversation, make it about helping them.
Yeah.
Like I always like to
Totally.
say, hey, how can I help you? Because you do not know what they're looking for that you might be able to help them with, right? They may be looking for an accountant and your uncle's an accountant.
Yeah.
Right. And like, that's not a tech thing at all, but people are always looking for help. And if you make it about helping them, I can tell you, there are people that I've helped get jobs and they remember that for a long time.
And I've had people I've gone to things with, like a smaller startup, and when we separate, and so in this case, this person worked for HR in a biotech startup, but they weren't hiring, and so someone walked up to her and was like, blah, 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 what are you doing? And it was, and like, oh, you can't give me a job, and left, and it was like, she knows me, I know a lot of people. And she is in HR and has a huge HR network, because they meet and talk about stuff, and it was like, you really like cut that conversation short when you shouldn't have, because of who she knows. And like, if you ever meet an HR, they know a lot of people who are hiring. So that's not like, and so it's really like, that's the same thing what you're saying is like, you can sniff it out and they're like, you can't do anything for me, see you. Yeah. Like, well, yeah, I'm not gonna do it. Because I can tell what you're looking for. And so that's what I think the big keys for me that you've all touched on is like, don't do it just because you want something from somebody. Because everyone sees that and senses it, and it's like, it's dirty.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would highlight here, which has nothing to do with jobs, is that you should be curious and you're going to learn. Like there's so many things I've learned over the years from talking to people. Like I had no idea this is something you're doing, and that's very fascinating. And you're using technology this way, and oh, you're using this new technology. Tell me about that. Oh, that sounds amazing, and I had no idea about that. And the thing is, if you stay curious and you're trying to learn, then you're going to pick up that kind of stuff, and that might help you in ways that you didn't expect.
Cool. So we have a couple minutes left. Are there any questions from people on Zoom or people in the room or comments?
I have a non-networking question for the more experienced guys who've hired and dealt with company culture. Do you think, as someone who's looking for a new job, it's a good question to ask if a company has like a defined culture, or do you usually see that company cultures are just something that exists because of the way that everyone interacts already?
I feel like there is at least investing back into the culture in some sense that you should be able to suss out when you talk to people.
It's definitely both.
Yeah.
And if you have a place that's not intentionally building towards some sort of culture or has those guiding principles, then that means that it's just gonna be whatever the personalities of those involved, which means when those people leave, the culture will change slowly.
Yeah, you should definitely ask about it.
Yeah, it's a great
Definitely
question.
dig, I would certainly, I mean, that's one of the biggest things. If I'm ever gonna work anywhere, like the culture is what makes your work environment enjoyable, right? And so think about and figure out what those questions are so you can really dig down, right? Because you're really trying to evaluate, is this a surface answer? Like how to, it's kind of the flip side of the behavioral that you might get asked, but like, you should be doing the same thing. Well, tell me about the culture of the company, and like, okay, you stated some values. Well, what are some examples? How do you guys live that? Like, can you tell me how you live those things this week? Like, that should be a very easy question if there's a good culture. Like I could rattle off 10 right now, right, of this past week or the week before, right, of how values are lived through like employees and how we try to encourage that. So yeah, I would say that would be number one for me.
I would even ask, like, if you're going through the interview process, ask them directly, like, how do you assess culture fits for your company? Because like for our hiring process, before you even get to our technical interview, you go through a cultural evaluation first. Because for us, it's, if you're not going to fit on the culture of our team, then it's a waste of all of our time. So we try to go with that first. So I would ask the question.
And it's a both way fit, because
Yeah.
we want you to fit for what we're looking for, but we want to make sure we fit for whatever it is you're looking for, because everybody's looking for something different.
Rob, sorry, I just want
Yeah,
to.
comment on this. I think you guys are probably the exception. It sounds like you do a good job of this. I can also tell you that like culture gets fabricated sometimes. And this is where networking is super important. Like you need to know somebody that works there. He can tell you, like the company I started, the culture turned to crap, quite honestly, towards the end of my tenure. And that's right when Kyle left and right when I was going out the door. And we hired like a people person, and they had like culture became fake. Like it was crafted and it was like, the culture is really good at this company. So if you just interviewed with somebody, they would tote the company line. But if you actually talk to somebody on the inside, they're like, I don't know, it's a little bit weird. Like it's kind of digressed, so just be wary of getting the messaging. So
I was gonna ask that, it's hard to find someone who's like gonna say something bad about the company that they're currently working for.
yeah, well, I think if you're a network and you know them, they should give you the info. And I think like founder-led companies probably have an advantage, right? Because you keep that same culture and you can sort of really culture that or cultivate that.
I mean, you can look at signals, right? I mean, I would say for our engineering interviews, like it's the same thing. Like I would usually be the one who is having that first conversation, and I'm talking about technical things, but we're not diving in. I'm really asking those questions to evaluate the cultural fit. Does this person take ownership, initiative, like all of the things that I would care about, right? And if I see, yeah, I think so, then that gets moved on, and that's more of that technical question. And I mean, that would be something else as an engineer I'd be looking at. Are they just putting me through like leak code or whatever? Right? Like, is this even real world applicable questions, right? Like, is this what I'm really going to be doing? I mean, for us, like we design our interview process to be very human and down to earth, because I don't want somebody who's just going to study for some algorithms.
Depth first search.
Yeah.
So Robyn, did you want to say something? So I just want to make sure you can chime in on the culture question if you want.
One of the questions I really like to ask is like, who is your favorite employee and why? And if they're like, oh, Joe comes in on the weekends and works at late night hours, I'm like, all right, cool. So you all don't do like work-life balance here. So that's like, I think a good way to kind of ask about culture without asking about culture, but I think what everybody else said is exactly right.
I just want to emphasize what Jerry said, or no, actually, I'm sorry, Drew said this. It's when I was young, I thought it was all about me conforming to the company's expectations of me. And as I get older, the more I realize it's like, you gotta have that mutual fit, because there's a ton of companies out in the world. And if you contort yourself, you will be able to survive at a company, but you won't have very much fun and you won't enjoy things for very long. And and that's a very privileged thing for me to say, right? Because I've been able to get jobs through my network, but like, you want to move towards finding companies that resonate with you, and that, not everyone might want to like take ownership and initiative like Kyle's talking about, right? And I worked with people at a school district where it was totally clock punching, and those people were happy, and that was fine, because there's a need for that kind of role too, but you got to find the right place.
And I think company dynamic or company size, right? Like in a startup or a Series B, there's going to be a little more ambiguity in roadmap and things like that, to where I want engineers who are thinking like more product centric, who are going to be able to push back on product and ask those hard questions, right? So that we get to the best solution. Some engineers don't want that. Like, we just had an engineer who left, and I think the ambiguity was not something, he wanted things, more laid out, and that's totally fine. And, he's moving to, a bigger company. And so that's great that like, he was able to realize that, right, and get to a spot that he's gonna hopefully be more happy and productive in.
Awesome. Chris?
Yeah, so I wanted to comment on the fact that I think what Robyn said was pretty key there. I think over the course of my career, I've never actually said the word company culture in any interview I've ever been a part of on both sides of the chain. And I always found that those that understand how to ask questions about culture, they're not actually asking questions about culture, are a little bit better understanding of themselves and where they have a fit more than the company, right? Because it's a two-way relationship. And if you don't know who you are, you're never going to find a place that you're going to be happy at working. So it starts like in the mirror first, and then where the company connects you with. But you really don't even have to say the word company culture. I think sometimes I think it's just an easy thing to say, but it's going to get the same happy, go lucky, live, love answer every single time. So,
Good laugh, love.
well, yeah, the challenge factory question. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good joke.
But the thing that, what you're all talking about that reminded me was like, we interviewed a person who's a developer, and we have our CX people or our sales talk to those people first sometimes. And he was literally like, why am I talking to you? Let's talk code. And they were like, because I have to work with you. And we were like,
This is why.
yeah, like you're not our culture because you don't want to like chat and like you want to be like, let's talk about code all the time. And like, that's fine. There's a place for that. But we didn't want that person. Even though like we're like, your technical chops seem great, but your soft skills are way off the charts bad. Because you're like dismissing the person you would occasionally interact with right away. I was like, whoa, major red flag. And that's like a bad culture fit.
Doesn't mean it's a bad person, right? You
No,
got a great
I
fit.
think they were nice.
Yeah.
So I think that's the.
But it's a respect thing too, to the like engineer, like a woman manager who would interact with this man.
Yeah.
Who are you? I mean,
Yeah.
There was a miss.
Growth opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, right away. Check.
There's the manager. Cool, well,
Let's talk to
I promised an hour to the panelists, so this is kind of the end. So thank you all very much for coming. Thank you on the Zoom. Great stuff. I think this will go up on YouTube. So if there's anything that you said that you don't want to go up on YouTube, too late. But thank you all, and thanks to all our panelists.